Alright, so this is starting to look like something. We have something going on here. A long ways from being done, but a long way from where we started. And just to reference this, I'm going to run up this layer stack and just turn off all of the reflections we've added. And you can see instantly how far we've come just by adding those in. It's almost like these portions of the guitar are just kind of jumping up off the guitar, jumping up off the page. And I'm not quite happy with my gradient mask there. That's a little better. Okay, now I'm going to save this again. All right, cool. So now we're looking pretty good here. We're in control. I'm going to add our little color background in there. A little glow behind it even enhances that a little more. But let's take a look at the guitar top itself. If we were to remove our reflections again, it's still pretty evenly lit. Not necessarily what we want to see. So we talked a little bit about layer masks. What layer masks do is they create levels of opacity and transparency based on the grayscale data that's in them, and it affects only the RGB data of that particular layer. So what we need to do is we need to create some interest on the actual painted surface of the guitar so it looks like it's being lit. It looks like it's in an environment of some sort. And keep in mind when you're working with lighting, there are only two things you can do with it. You can add it and you can subtract it. You can reflect it, but again, that's really just adding light to a surface. So in a sense, adding and reflecting are basically the same thing, though in practice they're not. For what we're doing here, we basically have two options, adding and subtracting light. I think what we want to do on the guitar's painted surfaces, we want to subtract some light. Because we've added light by using our reflections, now we want to subtract some light from our paint. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, bring it down, and I'm going to call this our black body. Going to control click it, set the black color, and fill it. And we don't see it right away because our green one is still on top of it, but we do have a black body down there. So what we want to do is with our green layer selected, we're going to go ahead and add a layer mask. And very similarly to what we just did with our reflection layers, we're going to do with our painted surface, except this time around we are going to remove light from the process. So if we click and drag in here, just click about like so, and then that's the wrong tool. There we go. If we click and drag in this area and just pull out a gradient on our layer mask, you can kind of start to see what's happening here. And this is not where we want to end up, but you can see just as an example what's happening if I turn on this layer mask. We have our bright white spot in the center, which is retaining most of our green, or not, if not all of our green, if they're pure white pixels. And as we fade off into these grayscale stages and into black, we are revealing the black layer that's below it. If I turn off this black layer, it's now transitioning to our gray layer, our gray gradient below. If I turn that off, we see that we have transparency on the layer, and that's being caused by the layer mask. If I disable that, you'll see we go back 100% opaque. So I'll turn that back on and get our layers back in place. So it's really important that you understand what we're doing here. We're using this layer mask to simulate lighting on the top of our guitar. So what we want to do, we said we want to subtract some light. Well, if we turn these back on, you can see there's some interesting things already happening there. But it's important to understand, if you had, what we're doing in this case, we're assuming our lighting source is you, the viewer. If you could imagine your eyes or your soul or your inner being is the light that is lighting up this project, it's basically shining directly on to the face of the guitar from that perspective. And I know that light doesn't travel in, that manner, that that they have diverging rays and all that good stuff. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So that being the case, this part of the guitar is a large flat plateau. It is flat to the camera and flat to you, our lighting source. But from about the point where the bridge mounts to the neck pocket, if you were to look at this guitar from the side view, it slopes from this point to this point at a 4-degree slope. So this is approximately 1/4 of an inch, maybe 5/16 lower than what we have here. So keeping that in mind, if we were to pull our gradient and really stretch it out, and you can't see it, but I'm going way onto my other monitor, you can see we're creating a nice hot spot right there. I'm going to move it over a little bit, same thing. We're creating a nice hot spot right there that's evenly lit. And I'm not quite gotten it there. Sometimes you just have to mess with this and try it at various lengths till you get the look you're going for. So we've got our hot spot here, and it is trailing off in intensity because with this being flat to our light source and this basically tilting off axis from it, light is going to hit this area differently. And certainly down here where this is 4 degrees off axis of this, if you could imagine an axis pole going from you to the surface of the guitar, then this, looking at the side of this point is 4 degrees lower. It's down at a 4-degree slope from that axis. So yeah, it's gonna catch light, and it's gonna be affected by light differently, and that's really all we're trying to simulate here. And where we are talking about subtracting light, if you look around the rim of the guitar now, and let me just turn off our layer mask, and you'll see the difference. I mean, you can really see right now it's just flat and pretty uninteresting, but once we turn that layer mask back on, it really adds shape and contour, because it's you know, it's in an environment, and we don't know exactly how this environment is lit, but it's telling our eye that there's something going on with the lighting in this room. Alright, so getting back on track here, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, that looks pretty good. You know, if I would tweak it a little bit more maybe, and yeah, that's pretty good. And I apologize for the banding. I'm looping my signal, my VGA signal off the computer into a scan converter, which is looping it to my monitor, and I think the scan converter is kind of affecting my levels of color that the monitor will produce. So we're getting some banding, but you know, maybe by the time this is compressed and on YouTube, you won't even see it. But that's where that's coming from. So no big deal. Doesn't affect anything we're doing. But just I only mention it so you get the idea that this is in the real world, this is a very smooth transition from point A to point B. There's no banding or stair-stepping in that gradient. In fact, if I do this again, you'll see that it's very clean and clear.